You're listening to Beyond the Endpoint, a podcast from the Duke Clinical Research Institute. In this series, we're demystifying clinical research and answering your pressing questions about health and healthcare. You can find our full episodes at dcri.org/BTE.
Welcome to Beyond the Endpoint, the Duke Clinical Research Institute's podcast. I'm Dr. Manesh Patel, Chief of Cardiology at Duke, and I'm joined with my co-host, Dr. Emily O'Brien, faculty at the Duke Department of Population Health Sciences.
Thanks, Manesh. And as you know, we have a special edition of Beyond the Endpoint. We're going to do things a little bit differently today. Instead of looking at the latest trends or news in clinical research and medicine, we're actually going to be turning the spotlight on ourselves, your hosts.
Uh-oh.
I hope you're ready.
I better be, huh? We heard from listeners that they want to know more about you and me. And so today our conversation is a bit more casual and personal. We're hoping as we chat about ourselves and what drives us, and maybe a few stories that are real life and funny from our journeys building our careers in cardiovascular medicine and population science, people will get some benefit of feeling like they get a little insight into what we do and things like that. So I hope they get a sense of that. It's been really great working with you. And I guess, to set the scene, maybe, Emily, you want to give us the elevator pitch or sort of the 3 minutes where did you grow up? Where did you go to school? What are your kind of basics about how you got to the life you're in now?
Yeah. So I grew up in Charlotte. I don't think you know this about me, but I went to a very tiny school, Christian school, all the way from kindergarten through senior year. There were 17 people in my graduating class. And the plus side of this was it was pretty easy to be a leader for like any student group or any team. Like I think I was like
all the clubs.
Yeah, all the clubs. Yeah. And there was, I really like sports. And I remember for my senior year, they decided to start a girls soccer team, which was like, as you can imagine, total disaster with like barely enough people to play. But it really small school, then came to Duke and absolutely loved my college experience. It was very overwhelming seeing, 1,600 students in the freshman picture on East Campus. There's more people my age than I ever seen in my life. And so it was great, but also like a big adjustment. I had a great experience there and wasn't really sure what I wanted to do, but I liked math. I kind of liked statistics. And I thought maybe I'll do like consulting. And I was sort of interested in health and ended up discovering epidemiology. Didn't know what it was, but we had a program down the road at a school that I knew very well due to our basketball rivalry at UNC. They have a great school, public health.
You've been in both sides of the blue, huh?
That's right. My father was also Duke grad. And so it was a real betrayal to even consider going to UNC for grad school, but really fell in love with the program and had a great experience there. And then found the Duke Clinical Research Institute and outcomes research and was really starting to get interested in real world data and had some great mentors as a fellow there and then stayed on faculty and have been here ever since. So it's been quite a journey. Always thought I was going to get out of North Carolina, but I have really loved the Triangle and two great institutions and a lot of fun along the way.
Wow, I didn't know that you were a North Carolina person so much. Definitely knew about maybe a little bit of Duke and the UNC stuff before the research. That's fantastic. Do you get back to Charlotte a lot? Do you ever go back and talk to the kids in that school or schools like it about what the work and life could be like?
Yeah, my parents still live in Charlotte, so I'm back there a lot. My sister's there also, and I go to visit my nieces, and it's a great city. Yeah, I spent some time also just around Duke and UNC on these various councils talking to students and trying to share some perspective and give them some reassurance that not everybody takes a perfectly straight path. And sometimes it takes a little bit of time to figure out what you want to do. But yeah, I still love North Carolina. It's a wonderful state. I know you have quite the journey making it to North Carolina yourself. You were born in Uganda, I just found out.
Yeah, it's a little bit longer, different journey. So let me see if I can give the shorthand version. So my parents were married in India and then moved to Africa because my mom's father was in the British school system. And so being of Indian origin, they moved to Africa because he was in the British school system as a principal. So my dad could get a job working at a store, and my mom was one of 7, the oldest daughter. So imagine marrying into that family. They're a fantastic uncle and aunt family, but like a large family of 7 and 2 older brothers. And my dad came in. So it was, I'm sure, interesting for him. But we were blessed, and my parents had my older brother and then me. And then in, I guess, 71, 72, after a year or two, Idi Amin came in and sort of said all non-Africans have to leave. And there was this whole, as many people know in Uganda, sort of an exodus, which my parents did along with a lot of the other family, both to Canada and eventually to the United States. So I grew up in South Georgia. So going from that household and going to second or third grade in South Georgia, this will be hard to believe, but Like, I think my third grade teacher talked to my mom in Statesboro, Georgia, and was like, does he know English? Because he doesn't talk a lot. And now, obviously, I've overcome that for the next 30, 40 years. So I grew up in South Georgia, loved it, grew up watching Georgia football, and then went to high school. My parents helped run hotels, do different things like that. And in the late, I guess, 80s, they moved to Savannah, Georgia, where I was for high school. And I went to a military Catholic high school called Benedictine, which I still represent the cadets. And so I went there and then went to Vanderbilt for university. And the way I picked Vanderbilt was, one, I was lucky enough to get in. And second, I thought it was far enough away to where my dad could not drive and drop in on me in one day's time, because it was like from Savannah to Vanderbilt would be like 8 hours. I'm like, he's not going to drive 8 hours. And then literally like the second weekend at freshman orientation, like the door knocked and he showed up with some food for my mom. I was like, oh my gosh, I haven't gotten far away. Thankfully, I went to college when there were no cell phones, no Find My iPhone. So most of my freshman activities could not be tracked. To say that it wasn't a straight journey. Somewhere along the line there, at least near the end of, I guess, second or third year, I got interested in physiology really, and then got interested kind of into medicine that way. And then was lucky enough to go to Emory Med School, where I was in Atlanta, loved Grady Hospital, and came to Duke in 97 to do my residency. And mainly because when I rounded in medicine here as a visiting medical student, just to interview, I saw that they were talking about evidence. They were not just taking care of patients. They were like referencing articles, talking about stuff that I had not yet at least spent enough time thinking about. So those were, I'd say, the big informative things. So I matched in residency, and then as an intern was in the CICU and rounded with like Rob Califf and others. And those just made significant impacts on my life, and decided to do cardiology. Have stayed here to do it ever since.
So, Manesh, I do want to dig in on one piece of this journey. So I think, people see you and they see Chief of Cardiology, incoming president of AHA. I think you were AHA's Physician of the Year a few years ago. Those are just a couple of the accolades. But what was your undergraduate experience like? There are these rumors floating around about trying to fail out or something like that. Tell us about that part of the story.
What I tell my kids now, my daughter's a freshman at Emory, my son's a junior at University of Chicago. There are not straight lines for any of us. Honestly, I was just learning how to balance life, right? Like when you go to college, your first year, you're like, oh my gosh, all this freedom, time, fun, parties, do all these things. I had an advisor at Vanderbilt, even though I'd taken French and Spanish in high school. It was a German advisor. You should take German. I was like, sure, okay, yeah, open my mind. And so then I took an 8 a.m. intro to German class. What kind of craziness was that? So let's just say I don't know German very well. I didn't do as well as one would imagine in my first semester or two. At the end, I figured it out and did a little bit better. So my parents were like, if we're going to spend this extra money and have you go to Vanderbilt, you should probably get some good grades. I don't say that to mean that like you shouldn't figure out how to balance these things better, but I say it just because, as I've been telling others, it is a journey for all of us. And somewhere around the second or third year, I started really figuring out how I could balance my time, go out, have a good time, still study, still get grades and things. And then eventually was blessed enough to get into medical school and then residency.
And was that passion for medicine there from the beginning, or when did that come about? When did you realize that was the path you wanted to take?
No, I think about it same for you. Like, I think I'd be interested what you think about this. At each step, I've grown into it more. I would argue that this has been one of the joys, just interacting with you and doing this podcast. It's just, there's a lot of different things I've gotten to do. And I think I'm blessed and privileged to do it. But what happens is, as you enjoy something or you get to interact with people more, you go farther into something. And I'll just say medicine with research, or research in clinical research or epidemiologic research that could affect human lives in a really meaningful way. That starts to get you, I think, fired up to do things where you can see that. But by no means was I a perfect student. And I think what happened was that I started to see myself in others, and hopefully others started to see the potential in me, which is always important. Were there key mentors for you along the way, or people that like helped you find that perspective? Because I would say in medicine, it's very regimented. Like, you got to go to med school, you got to do residency, and then eventually you do fellowship. But in some of the stuff you do, like, I could imagine like whoever's studying this and the question they ask or the way they see the world might really affect you depending on who your mentor is.
I had the best mentors. I had the best mentors in grad school. Still have great mentors here, Duke. But, to have great support in your mid-20s when like you don't even really know who you are yet, much less how you want to be spending most of your waking hours for the rest of your life. Like, it's a ton of pressure. And my mentor at UNC, Wayne Rosamond, was just a very pragmatic guy. Like, UNC is such a great public health school, and like it's more kind of like classic epi academia. which honestly has been the source of a lot of great scientific discoveries over the years, have come from settings like that through Framingham and Eric and other cohorts. But he really encouraged me to kind of fall in love with the methods and the discipline, and said, there are a lot of different environments where you can do great work and apply these skills, and there's no right or wrong path. And if academia is the path for you, great, but like it's not a great fit for everybody. And so he connected me with people who'd taken like these winding journeys and gone to pharma for a little while, come back to academia, gone to work for nonprofits, and really gave me some good perspective. I would say maybe the most important takeaway from those discussions is like, there's really no such thing as a bad decision as long as you're informed and doing what you think is best for yourself. And every decision has pros and cons, and they can be part of a journey that maybe looks a little bit different. And it's funny now reflecting back on those conversations, because in my home department at Duke, almost nobody has the classic path to population health sciences. It's a discipline that's sort of evolved over time. And so we have people with degrees in math and others with psychology backgrounds, and then a couple like me who are more kind of classic public health with epi or biostats. But I think what really has stood out to me is that, as you said, everyone is energized by the work itself and by the challenge of answering these difficult questions and doing it in innovative ways. And that's what gets us all going. And it's nice to not have to worry so much about like the artificial silos that sometimes seem really rigid from the outside, because you get to see that, like people, they fell in love with something, then they followed that path and it worked out well.
Yeah, that's really powerful. I know Wayne from doing some stuff with the AHA and the Triangle. He's such a great person and always so focused on like what the data is. You've done work in epidemiology, neurology, cardiovascular disease. Was he the one, or the intersections just sort of driven by your interest in those areas?
Yeah, I mean, it's been really, I think, a function of new opportunities that have come up that I've gotten excited about, seeing other people like Leslie Curtis and Adrian, who they've done important work across lots of different therapeutic areas. Adrian was a really important mentor of mine early on at the DCRI, and he led a big PCORI-funded stroke project. And so we would joke like that he was like a pretend neurologist, like running the stroke project. But it was an important lesson because I saw that like he's assembled a team really that brings a lot of different complementary types of expertise. And so it's not like him just trying to do it all on his own. He knows that like he has certain areas where he can really be strong and other areas where it requires a little bit more support. So that was really important to kind of see that demonstrated. What I found out about myself, and you and I were talking about this, I think I've just accepted that I'm just not one of those people who can kind of do one thing for my whole career. I really like the variety and getting to take a method that we've used in, say, a cardiology registry-based study and use it in a claims-based dementia analysis, because we've learned a lot about data limitations from prior work. And so that's the part that really gets me excited, is public health is always changing. We have new challenges that are coming up all the time. We have new political environments that kind of throw things off for a while and then they recalibrate. And what I have really liked is like the new challenge of taking our experience and, new opportunities for applying innovative methods and seeing that kind of come together to address new challenges, because there's just so much that we don't know. And it's something that will humble you if you think you understand the answer, as we found out on so many of our episodes, right? That it's important to acknowledge that we still have so much more to learn. And I just like being part of that process.
No, it's amazing. And I can hear the fire in your voice. Like I think about the things that we learn in our path. People want to get to know, like, how do you get to do these things? Some of it is timing and it is people, and it's so much people driven. And then it's, I would say there's luck in that timing, but then there's effort. Like people don't realize that there is work here, that people are working hard and they're really driven by it.
So tell me a little bit more about that, Manesh. I mean, as you said, some of it's timing. And what I love to hear from people are like, what are the pivotal moments that you think about as you think about your journey from Emory all the way up now to being president-elect of the AHA? Were there specific moments that stood out as important for that trajectory?
Just like you were highlighting with Wayne, I mean, I think it's the interaction people have. As a resident, I knew I wanted to do cardiology. And your personal life gets into these important moments. I was dating my wife who was a resident at UNC at the time. And you have this moment where you're going to match. And so you're like, oh, I could go do cardiology in other parts of the world. At that time, it's like, oh, do you go to Cleveland Clinic? Do you go to these other places? We stayed at Duke, which is a great program too. And she was finishing up residency and was starting a job. And so there was like this amazing moment where it was clear that we wanted to be together, but we had this awkward, we're not at that point in our relationship, but I'm going to stay at Duke. So that, like, I'll just say from a life timing thing was really critical, because I'm so blessed that I stayed at Duke. Like I can imagine what my cardiology career would be at another organization. It's the thing at Duke where I had a lot of dumb ideas, and I know they're dumb now, but nobody ever directly said they were dumb. They were just like, well, this is how you'd have to figure out if that was right, but I would try to do it this way. And so it wasn't just like killing my spirit, but maybe teaching me how to channel that spirit, if you will. Because, like, I'll give you an example. Like, when I was in the cath lab as a junior faculty working at the DCRI, we would cath all these patients, and I realized, like, most of them, these great fellows would come in and go, like, this person's absolutely going to have coronary disease, Manesh. He or she's got this classic symptoms, these risk factors. Okay. And then we would cath them and they wouldn't have obstructive coronary disease. In fact, I started being like, okay, 5 French radial, because I've stopped believing our great fellows just because I know the prevalence of the cath lab must be lower. And finally, that led me to say, like, well, why are so many, like, I know we're a dupe, but how many people who have a heart cath in the United States don't have a blockage? And so I wanted to ask that question to the NCDR. We had that at DCRI, and people said, oh, sure, you can ask that. Eric Peterson and Pam Douglas was a great supporter early. He said, sure. And so I asked that question to the NCDR, and we found that like 60% of people at that time who had an elective cath, no other things, didn't have a blockage. I thought this was a seminal observation, like important. Some of the people there were like, yeah, that just says testing doesn't work. We know that, blah, blah. I go, I think we got to get this message out. I want to submit it to the New England Journal. So you can imagine how many times you've had that conversation. People are like, well, okay, I appreciate this like little finding you have needs to be submitted to the New England Journal, but like, let's keep it real for a second.
The comment I always get is, well, at least the desk rejection is quick.
That's
So
right.
we won't waste too much time here, at least.
That's right. So to her credit, Pam Douglas was like, sure, we should try if that's how passionate you're about it. Eric was a little bit less, we're going back and forth. Okay. So we submit it. A week later, the editor calls me and goes, can you verify these results? I'm like, yeah. 2 weeks later, they're like, okay, we're going to publish in the New England Journal. And that's how the low diagnostic yield of cardiac catheterization angiography got in the New England Journal in 2009. It was just because I was a junior faculty, had an observational question. But that's not where it stopped for us. We were like, well, then we should figure out what the right stress test is. And that's how we wrote the NHLBI grant promise with Pam Douglas to do a CTA versus stress testing study that I think opened up the CTA field. I get to be a part of that. It's a big team. But it's because I was making an observation. I could go back to a research institute where I could ask that question and then actually do it. And they didn't say, hey, that's too dumb. And then I think the field changed a little bit. Now, I will tell you where my career moved from there is I thought, oh, I'm going to do these trials, do these things. Like, it is great for your ego. You write a paper. But most of the cath community didn't like you writing a paper saying cath is clean. So like, when I was in this like appropriate years, like they're like, what is this clown doing? He's writing all this stuff about how we're not doing procedures well. I don't think that's what they were saying, but I had this feeling. And so I needed institutional support to say, ask the scientific questions, be true to your principles, and go try to answer and make the world a better place by getting to the right science. So I'll just say those lessons early on shaped me, and they shape how I think about how we should be interacting with others. It doesn't mean that that's the direction everyone's career is going to go. It's just figuring out that you're going to make an insight or do a study that you wouldn't have and getting that support. Another person who really helped me was Bob Harrington. He was a director of the DCRI at one point, but really has been and is a mentor of mine in many ways. I mean, he taught me how to do both clinical care and clinical research and balance those things, but really gave a lot of his time and still does just in mentoring and giving you direction. I think those kinds of role models really make a difference in our lives.
Well, along the lines of who is this clown, you are also famous for your practical jokes. I don't know if that's something your wife can also take credit for. I imagine she's dealt with some of this nonsense on her own at home. Can you tell us a little bit about that tradition and how that started?
Well, when we were fellows, we would play practical jokes on each other in the ICU and the wards and stuff. And this would go on where we'd have fake things get called in on a fax line or things like that. This would go on for a while. I will say the ones that I'll share are the ones that have been done to me. So I had played a practical joke on Skylar Jones, and he, to retaliate, had put my name in the Craigslist and said, free Santa rides. It was in December. Just call Manny at this number, put my cell phone. And all kids welcome. And so like this one Sunday, our phone starts blowing up. And I realized maybe these are cath lab techs. Maybe they're voices I recognize, but we were at the old Southern Seasons in Chapel Hill. I told my wife, I'm like, we have to go home immediately. So we went home and I took it down from Craigslist, sent him a note. I wanted my wife to cry and act like our kids had learned that Christmas isn't real, but it didn't work out. We've had a whole history of these where we've had a yard sale for somebody who was not having a yard sale and put signs up in their neighborhood. So at 6 a.m. on Saturday, it knocks. People want to get all the things out of their house. So there's a history of that, which is fun. But I understand you've got an interesting history too. You told me that you've done an illegal hike in Hawaii. You want to give me some intel into that, or how did that come about?
I've fallen in love with hiking. Strangely, it's, all these midlife stereotypes that I swore would never happen to me. And now here we are, but we hike the Haiku stairs. It's a super old, absolutely beautiful set of stairs all the way up this mountain near Honolulu. And since then, I've done some other crazy hikes, climbed the Bay Bridge in San Francisco, have really gotten bitten by the national park bug. So every time that we go on vacation, I'm always angling to get to a national park. And we were actually just in Acadia a couple weeks ago and did a beehive and precipice, which are like climbing ladders on the side of a mountain and just closing your eyes and trying to pretend you're somewhere else. So those are super fun. And I think that scratches that same itch that I was talking about in terms of like variety and just wanting to like spice things up, do something a little bit different. And so that's how I like to spend a lot of my time. I know also you and I have a common connection because of the puppy booth in AHA, which you started. And as of a week ago, I am now the beneficiary of because we adopted a puppy from the booth this year. Yes.
I'm so excited you do that. You sent me a photo and I sent you a photo of Mr. Bosco sleeping, thinking that now we have to have the dogs get together and get to know each other. That's awesome. And I do think it will change your life for the better, although it won't always feel that way, but it is really life-changing to have an adopted puppy at home.
We got to do a review of the evidence on pet ownership and cardiovascular outcomes.
Yeah, that's right. Well, I guess I'll ask a couple more questions as we wrap up. Tell me, if you weren't doing this, what else would you be doing?
I think that I would like to be a teacher. I love children. Like I like to be like a school teacher, I think. Absolutely love kids. I worked at summer camp, taught archery at summer camp one summer in college. But since I've had kids, I just love them so much. So anything that would allow me to be around kids, I think I would love. How about you?
I saw some of the archery instructing stuff on the web.
Yeah.
Some stories I was hesitant to bring it up because I had a whole like thought process of what that must have been like. But for me, I don't know. I guess I would say I'd probably be in business doing things with my dad. I think, growing up, it was like go through college enough to get some other profession or you're coming home and working. We've been blessed that my parents are close to home. And so we now get to have them around with our kids. And so that's been super fun. And I get to see them around grandkids. Has been another joy in what I get to do, which I think is important. People often want to say, you got this journey. How did you do that? It's a lot for me about just what drives us. And I guess what I've been really enjoying about our podcast is we're getting to know each other. And there are times where I'm like, oh, I should ask that. And then you'll ask it, or I'll see where your head is going with something. And I'll think, oh yeah, that's a really interesting perspective. Most of what I was saying for me in this position has been that we're blessed because the journey's not straight, but people have helped us. And, now you have the opportunity to help others. And so one of the best things about being at Duke and the TCRI is that it's really a pay it forward culture. We get to save and help. I have 1,000 of those stories where I thought I wanted to do something. They didn't all work out with a New England Journal publication. By the way, they worked out with other stuff, but some of that was really informative, whether it was clinically learning how to do something or learning that was the wrong road to go down. How about you? Somebody would say, what drives you to do what you're doing? What would you say that is?
I think that having a very clear view into the practical application of our work is just such a positive aspect of clinical research. You're getting to see things like guidelines being updated, and we have a score that we developed for the Orbit registry. I'll get emails about that and people say, oh, like we're using this now in our EHR, and they'll ask me questions about implementation. And it's just fun to think that, oh, like this might actually go beyond some paper that you publish. And that's the part that really, especially during COVID, we had a large vaccine safety surveillance study that we're just finishing up now. And, people were very interested in the data. We were able to enroll populations that weren't represented in trials, pregnant women,
Yeah.
and people with comorbidities, and to be able to have like some useful information that could help people make decisions about their care was just extremely powerful. And that's the part that really lights me up and keeps me going, is that hope that, that will continue and that we'll be able to adapt and innovate in a way that helps us to contribute even as the environment is changing so quickly around us.
My joy, a lot of this is around the act that when you're feeling like you're affecting someone's life or you're making service to something, whether it's through the research, the teams, the direct clinical care, or the people you're training, it's pretty joyful. And when others have helped you do it, it's really meaningful. Emily, if somebody was to say, what's your superpower? What would you say is your superpower?
I think that my superpower is probably adaptability. I have 3 siblings, so it was family of 4. Things were crazy, chaotic all the time. Something was going on, something was going wrong. And I think I just learned to just ride those waves and know that, the chaos was going to be there and it was going to be okay and we would figure it out together. So I think that's been helpful for research where things are somewhat unpredictable. How about you?
I see some components of my wife and myself and our children, and I think the things that I find to give me the most joy and then where I can work the best feels like it's in in teams where I can help understand what someone needs so that I'm not trying to. One of the hardest things to do is to play in the sandbox from when you're a little child. And so I'm trying most of my time to have fun playing in the sandbox. My daughter is very, very good at this. Her emotional intelligence at the table, like I'll walk in and she'll know something's wrong, like her ability to read that. It's powerful without my face that I think is changed. My son has a work ethic probably that's really, really from her mom and me. So as I think about it, I think hopefully my superpower is, making others feel like they're accomplishing what they want to. I want to be a good point guard. I don't have to take every shot. I want to pass the ball, see others succeed. Occasionally, because of ego, I want to take a big shot, and that's fun. But I tell people like the joy of this that we get to do in research or clinical care is to see others get to do those things. And then occasionally when it matters, helping make that call. So that I find that that's where I want to spend my time. And hopefully that's where we get to. I'll have to say the other thing that's really fun about our organization and just the privilege is to do things like this, get to know other people really well, do things like Beyond the Endpoint, open my mind to the ways like I certainly hadn't thought about epidemiology in any way, the way you think about it. So it's good to learn, right? And I constantly want to learn new things. So those are good things. And then getting to know people, like life's about service and purpose. And if you can do it with people that make it enjoyable, then it's really fun. And I think our organization lets us do that in a scientific way. So I'm really excited to get to do that.
I'm going to need your advice on practical jokes. I have two budding practical jokesters in my home as we speak. I'm trying to distract them with the dog now, channel their energy into good, but I know that in the future there will be all sorts of hijinks, so I may be hitting you up for some ideas. This has been a super fun conversation. Thanks, Manesh, so much for sharing a little bit about yourself and what motivates you and all the ways that mentors helped shape your career and teams have really been a source of joy and gratitude as you've developed into the leader that you are today.
You too. And I think it's a great episode to discuss the gratitude we all have for the things you do. It's been great to be on the host with you. Hopefully people have gotten a sense of what drives us. And that kind of brings us to the end of this special episode. So I really want to thank you for having this conversation of how we got to where we are and how others can engage in this way. This has been an episode of Beyond the Endpoint. We're taking a break for the holiday season, but we'll be back in early January with some exciting topics and conversations to demystify clinical research.
Until then, we wish all our listeners a wonderful start to 2026. Thank you so much for joining us this year. And as always, we encourage you to share your thoughts or topic recommendations by emailing us at beyondtheendpoint@duke.edu.
And don't forget to subscribe to the podcast on SoundCloud, Spotify, Amazon Music, or Apple Podcasts. You can also connect with the Duke Clinical Research Institute on LinkedIn by following @DCRI News on X and Blue Sky. We hope to see you next time on Beyond the Endpoint.
This has been Beyond the Endpoint. Resources related to this episode are available on dcri.org/BTE. If you have any burning questions about clinical research or healthcare, drop us a line at beyondtheendpoint@duke.edu. We'd love to address your questions in a future episode.